Hometowns and Heroes, headquartered in Arizona, had an opportunity to attend this year's Western Conservative Conference, which meets every several years. This year, the location for the conference was in the beautiful Phoenix Convention Center. And now we can bring to you a slide presentation featuring some of the dignitaries and sponsors who were in attendance at the opening reception mixer. You may recognize a number of the U.S. congressional representatives from the state of Arizona and even Virginia, followed by introductory remarks in video clips that we took during the opening ceremony itself. Watch. We're here at the Western Conservative Conference, which takes place here at the Phoenix Convention Center. Yes, and today we have a full schedule of many speakers. Judicial watches here, Heritage Foundation, Sheriff Joe, our former hometown hero. You want to be sure and see this show. Are you going to be here all day?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's going to be a great day. You want to finish up with something like...
Shoot the British.
Many of you complimented me, and thank you very much, about the tax plan that I had, 999. You want to know why you liked it so well? It was simple to understand. It was simple to explain. And it encapsulated a lot of the things that we wanted from a tax code. And who was the first guy who mentioned 999? Who was up earlier? Oh, he's hiding in the back. And here's the thing about it, and this gets back to messaging. I went to my economic advisor. Since you set me up, I'm going to tell the story. And I said, we need a tax approach that makes the flat tax people happy, the fair tax people happy, and it also makes some of the liberals happy that we're going to tax corporate America. I said, so I want it to be revenue neutral. And he came back and said, well, we can have a tax on personal income, 8.75%, tax on a national sales tax of 8.75%, and a tax on corporate profits of 8.75%. We literally were in the back of a car headed to the airport from Art Laffer's office. And I said, let me get this straight. You want me running around the country talking about 8.75, 8.75, 8.75? I said, I was a math major in school, in college. There's something called rounding. I said, how about if I go around the country talking about 999? Sometimes the simplest ideas can get you the greatest amounts of mileage. That's what we've got to do as a party. Look for those kernels of simple ideas that can help bring people into the party. One of the best phone calls I got earlier this week on my radio show, a black man called and said he's done with the Democrat Party, and he told me why He said because he had been listening to my show, his eyes are opening, he's getting the facts, he knows what the truth is, and he said, I'm tired of being lied to. I happen to have been blessed with a big microphone and a big mouth, as a friend of mine told me. I said, that's a nice way to put it. And I use this big mouth to promote the results and our ideals of less government, less taxes, and more individual responsibility. And to counter the victim card by saying, I'm not a victim, you're not a victim, nobody's a victim. This is America, the United States of America. Nowhere else in the country can you achieve what people in this country can achieve if they're willing to work hard enough and long enough to do it. Complacency. Our work is just beginning. The president hasn't been in office 2 years yet. And people are ready to sit down, stop working. He's moving at warp speed. Unfortunately, some people that are part of the bureaucracy are still moving at political speed. And when he has had the turnover that he's had in his administration, the liberal media wants to call it chaos in the administration. That's not chaos. That's leadership. That's leadership. When I first went to Godfather's Pizza in 1986, within the first year, I had to fire my vice president of finance, fire my vice president of marketing, and fire my vice president of operations within the first year. They didn't call that chaos. They weren't up to the job. That's what leaders do. You have to make those tough calls. So I don't see it as chaos. I see it as leadership. The late Peter Drucker, one of the great management thinkers of all time, said in one of the first seminars I ever attended as a young man working for Coca-Cola. Drucker stood and talked probably for an hour, Lori. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. I only remember one thing he said. Peter Drucker said, if you make a person or people mistake, fix it immediately. I never forgot that. Never forgot that.
When we talk about separation of powers, we're talking about the separation of powers between states and the federal government. When they created the Constitution, our leaders told us that the states will be able to do almost anything they want, and the federal government will have very limited enumerated powers. We are so backwards and upside down that right now, most state laws in every state, not most, every state, are in response to the federal dictates from Washington, D.C. This must change. If we're to be a free people, and if the United States is to endure, that has got to change. And the way it changes is the people that are here with me today, Dave Brat, Paul Gosar, other conservatives in Congress, have got to make the change. And right now, we've got 70 or 80 of us in the House. We need more. And so what we need to do is this, very simply. When we see things like a budget bill that we will borrow between $800 and $900 billion to fund, that will exacerbate our structural deficit and increase our national debt to $22 trillion, we cannot hang our head. We can't hang our head. We can't hold it up with pride, but we can hold it up with frustration and anger and renewed determination. We need help. The President needs help. Do you think that that was the President's ideal budget? Certainly wasn't. And it wasn't the ideal budget for the American people. And if we become complacent and discouraged and sit on our hands, if you think that was a bad budget, you let Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi get hold of the next budget. They had enough of a hand in this one. Let's not give them any more. We have got to be active, engaged, and the fact that you're here tells me that you are those who will do that. And so I implore you, with all the passion in my heart, to do not give up, never give up, never give up. Let's fight aggressively and tell our story, because it is the winning story, and we'll prevail next November. We have to, because the first step the Democrats will do, if they get the House, the first step, they've already been trying to do this for 2 years, they will introduce a resolution of impeachment. We cannot let that happen. We dare not do it. Let's fight hard. Thank you for letting me come. Thank you to Lori.
What is the greatest, and this is for to drive your liberal friends absolutely nuts. This is the moral, we had Ben Shapiro in the other day. This is the moral argument that they cannot answer. And it blows away all other moral arguments, right? So if you don't want to get into the religious argument, do this one. In terms of human welfare, what is the greatest increase in human welfare in all of human history? And it's happened in the last 20 years. And it's the increase, when I started teaching economics, the Chinese and the Indians were making $1,000 each per year. What does that get you? Food and a little vegetables if you're lucky, right? And maybe subsistence housing, and that's it. Now they're up to $10,000 a year per person in 20 years, and they're flying, right? So that, no debate about it, is the greatest, right, for 2.5 billion people, all children of God. I always say that. Do you think the press ever quotes me on that one? 2.5 billion children of God. Their lives have been made incredibly much better. They get access now to health, transportation, some housing, etc. And what brought that about? Capitalism. Capitalism and freedom is what brought that about. The greatest increase in human welfare in all of human history. And so we've got the moral argument on our side. We've got the rule of law on our side. We've got the free market argument on our side. And somehow we're losing. It's incredible. Right? So I'm just urging you today, we're right, they're wrong. They oppose all three. Right? The Judeo-Christian tradition is under assault in higher ed. You all know that. The rule of law is under assault with sanctuary cities and people saying we're not even going to follow the law. The free market system is under assault everywhere, intentionally. So we need to fight the fight. It is tough. They fight nasty. We don't, but we do need to fight. And so I urge you all to keep your chins up as we go forward. People always say God's on our side, etc. And I have no doubt about that. God is right there, right? The question is, where are the people? Are we going into the desert or are we coming out of the desert? And that's up for you to answer.
I don't ask anything of anybody else that I don't do in return. So remember back at the State of the Union, I made a comment in regards to an issue that popped up. We had members from the Republicans and Democrats bringing supposed illegals to the State of the Union. Remember that? And it really bothered me, because what ends up happening is if you're going to attend the State of the Union, you have to provide a Social Security, a valid Social Security number to get in. So somebody was lying to me. Either these were imposters looking for fame, or number two, they were totally defying the realm of the law. Because if they were not valid, they were stealing someone else's identity. So we called the Capitol Police and said, we'd like you to check, because supposedly there's 30 of these individuals coming to the State of the Union, and you should check the Social Security numbers. Congressman Gosar didn't really realize to go that far. I'm like, come on, you got to. Well, of course, they didn't, and we had supposedly 30 attend. And what ended up happening, it became a huge news cycle, and I actually had a resolution put on the floor to censure me for calling out the law. That's what's wrong with Congress. They have become the lawbreakers. Remember the part about confirmations of people for positions for the presidency. I want you to step back to the nomination of Loretta Lynch. Remember that one? Well, I went into a dither because it was quick voted out of the House or the Senate Judiciary Committee, which Senator Flake actually sat. And he voted for that nomination. So I had a speaking engagement up in Flagstaff at a Lincoln Day dinner. And I went nuts. Advise and confirm means that you're to look at that nominee to see if they are qualified. I agree that a president has every right to get the people he wants into place as long as they are qualified. So I went off. The very next night, I had a second Lincoln Day dinner in Casa Grande. And Senator Flake showed up. He wasn't on the list, and he wanted to debate me. So here's what happened. He went before me. A gentleman, a congressman, is going to talk to you tonight about confirmation process. Every president has a right, he said, to get the people they want in the positions they want, no matter what, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And besides, in the Senate we have a 60-vote threshold. We have our rules, and that's just the way they are. And this congressman is dangerously using his seat to petition a member of the U.S. Senate, close to an unethical action. And he walks off. So I got back up there, and you probably know me now a little bit. I was a little hot. So I wasn't going to talk about this, but now I am. I said, Senator Flake, on the advising consent, let's go through the requirements. This individual was placed to represent the Attorney General of the United States of America. Do they meet the minimum requirements? Well, she was a U.S. attorney. There's one step. But it also has to do with your interrogatories, your conversation back as members of the Senate, back and forth with that individual, to see if they apply to the biggest litmus test, the Constitution and the rule of law. I said, Senator Flake, did she pass? No, she didn't. Immigration. She said she was going to uphold the president's, at that time, Barack Obama's, DACA order. And da-da-da-da-da. I said, so your job was to inform the president, not qualified, bring a new candidate. Number two, Senator, please show me in the Constitution where it requires 60 votes for anything. I proceeded to walk off the stage, handed him the Constitution, and waited. It didn't exist, right? And the third thing that I said, the conversation to say that a member of Congress was unethically using his job to petition a U.S. senator, I want to remind you, Senator, I'm one of your constituents, And I have the right anytime, anywhere, any place, whether it be a bathroom or a grocery store, to petition you on any damn issue I want. Now, why did I bring that up? It's because we're now confronted again with the same problem. The 60-vote threshold does not exist, only in arcane language set up by the rules of the Senate. We need to start focusing on what the problem is, and that's the Senate. So here's some ideas. Number one, we ought to start the petitioning of a campaign to Mitch McConnell, who now has backlogged the president on his conferees. Because here's why. Chuck Schumer has told Mitch McConnell that every nominee will take 30 hours of confirmation time on the floor, regardless if they like him or hate them. You know what, if I was Mitch McConnell, I'd have told Chuck, you know, Chuck, I'm glad you came up with that idea. Because you're going to be the one to break it to your brothers and sisters. That now you have 24 running for re-election. We have 10 running for re-election. You're staying here 24/7. I'm bringing out the beds, the medics, and the IVs. We're running you 24/7 until we get these done. I'm going to break you. My point is leadership comes at a cost. It comes as a detail. You elected me to elect leaders that answer to us who answer to you. This is insane.
Over the last 10 years, Texas and Florida have averaged 1 million additional residents. And look at that. New York and California, the two of them combined have lost 2.5 million residents. What this is telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is the American people every single day are voting with their feet against liberal policies, and they are moving to states that have conservative policies. Don't you think that would tell liberals something? Don't you think they would get this? By the way, Texas and Florida, what is the income tax rate in Texas and Florida? Anybody know? 0. In California and New York, they charge 13.5%. You know, you don't have to be a genius. By the way, do any of you know who Paul Krugman is, this left-wing economist who writes for the New York Times? Paul Krugman, I debated him a few months ago on this, and I showed him this, and I said, Paul Krugman, if liberalism is so wonderful for the country, why are people leaving the liberal states and going to the conservative states, right? Why are they leaving these, workers' paradises that you've set up in New Jersey and Connecticut, my home state of Illinois, and all these states, and they're going to Arizona, and they're going to Utah, and they're going to Florida, and they're going to Texas? You know what he said? He said, there's a very simple explanation for this, Steve Moore. The reason that people are leaving the blue states for the red states is because of the weather. Because of the weather. Now, that's not a completely stupid thing to say. Who wouldn't want to live in Arizona over living in Buffalo, New York? But then I just zinged him. I hit him so hard right under the belt. I think you'll appreciate this. I said, well, gee, Paul Krugman, that's a very interesting insight. But if people are leaving for the weather, why are people packing their bags and leaving San Diego and moving to Bismarck, North Dakota? Nobody does that for the weather. It's because the policies are right.